Jovan, Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, Lakers beat writer for The Athletic, and welcome to episode 15 of Buha's Block. I am pleased to be joined by Tim, a.k.a. Cranjis McBasketball, one of the smartest people covering the Lakers, and one of the only people I would allow on this podcast to not reveal their identity. Cranjis is that smart that I need to hear his insight going into this series. So Tim, how you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing well. Happy to be here. Thank you for the flexibility, of course, and always good to chat, man. This is going to be a tough series, but happy to be here, break it down with you, and try to find any little possible edge we might be able to, because this is a really, really good basketball team LA's going to be facing.
Yeah, so let's get into it. So the format for today is going to be one Lakers question, one Nuggets question, one Lakers X factor in terms of a player, one Nuggets X factor in terms of a player, a series X factor, and then Tim and I will give our series prediction. So Tim, I want to start with your big Lakers question. What is the biggest issue, topic, adjustment, whatever it is? Like, what is the biggest thing on your mind from a Lakers perspective entering this series?
Ooh, that's good. I think I'm going to go with, does Darvin Ham call plays at a high rate? And the reason I bring that up, this is something I've tracked this season. I've watched and rewatched and logged every Lakers half-court offensive possession this season, every single play. And I've tracked, they were in 5 out or 4 out or horns, and they ran this set play, or they were in their freelance offense, meaning they're out there kind of playing, pickup basketball offense. And with NBA guys, like, they know what they're doing, but there is a level of structure and organization, and like you run set plays for a reason. You run them to beat specific coverages, to know where everybody will be on the court, and to really manufacture good shots. I've tracked, 7,823 plays this season, and
Wow.
when the Lakers run, I know, man, it's a lot. It is. I guess I'm the foremost expert on the most niche thing, the Lakers half court, playbook. But when
I'm
they
sorry.
run their plays,
it's been much better lately, but first
Dude,
couple months were rough.
Yeah, I could not do this in the Frank Vogel years. I think that would be torture. I could not do this during the Byron Scott, the Luke Walton years. Like, it is, for all of Darvin's warts as a coach, one of the things that has been pretty good is the playbook itself. I think the play calling has left some room for improvement, and that is an important thing that I want to explain here. But what's in the playbook itself is really well designed. It uses the personnel well. It's generally putting guys in good positions to succeed. And when they're running those set plays, and then also something I'll call help beaters, where, like, you feed AD in the post. If the defense sends help, the Lakers have kind of built-in ways to counter that help based on what it looks like. It's not always going to be the same counter, because there are a lot of different ways to help in the post, but sometimes it's cuts, sometimes it's off-ball, pin-in flare screens, different looks to get your team to attack the weakness in what the defense is doing. I look at the percentage of the Lakers half-court plays that are either set plays or those help beaters, and that's, to me, the organized offense. And on a per-play basis, on a quarter-by-quarter basis, on a game-by-game basis, it is much better when they're organized. Looking at players, looking at lineups, like, this is what we want to see. And for me, in tracking every game, if the Lakers have been above a 55% rate, they are 19-2 on the season. This is something they control themselves. No one impacts this. This is Darvin Ham pulling out the play sheet and calling plays. This is the point guards are responsible, LeBron's responsible, but Darvin Ham, Phil Handy, Chris Gent, like Jordan Ott, these guys control this. 19-2 on the season. I don't care how many guys are injured. I don't care the quality of the opponent. 19-2. And they've done it against, the same caliber of opponents. They've done it with the same amount of, if not more, injuries. And they've been at their best dynamic offense, over a 120 offensive rating on average. If they're not doing that, looking at the team's record, they're a pretty mediocre team. And we saw, heading into the play-in game, the best 15-game stretch of the season in terms of that frequency. The percentage of the time they're running organized offense was at its peak the 15 games to end the regular season, which to me was exciting. I'm like, all right, here we go. This is awesome. This is what last year looked like, where they ramped up and then it helped them in the playoffs. And we see it, elevate lineups, elevate players, and elevate team performance. And then in the play-in game, they had their 5th worst game of the season in this regard. They ran plays like 40% of the time, which is not very good. And to me, heading into the series, which version of the Lakers offense will we get? Will we get the version that looks like it's stuck in mud, that's not calling plays, or will we get the version that is dynamic, it's targeting coverages, it is constantly making the defense, think and second guess and have to communicate and manufacture good looks? To me, that is a huge driver and something the team literally controls themselves, but it has been so inconsistent throughout the course of the season that I don't have full confidence heading into this matchup, but know for sure it will be, I guess, somewhat of an X factor. But I think that's my biggest question to them. And if they made the mistake of giving me a media credential, I'd be asking stuff around this as much as I could before they kick me out, because this matters and they need to do a good job with this. If they don't, they will not win the series.
Have you noticed any trends with that in terms of things that get them to run more plays or things that get them away from set organized offense and more in the freelancing? Like, are there certain lineup configurations, certain guys on the floor, certain opponents? Like, is it more organized against better teams or is it worse teams, or is it just kind of random? Again, you said it doesn't necessarily matter like who's in and out of the lineup, who's been available, that sort of thing. But like, have there been any trends that have either led to more organized offense or less?
I looked deep into this because I think that's a really good question. And looking at the quality of opponents, it has not mattered overall, or looking at the quality of defenses they faced has not really factored in. There's no relationship really there between those. I looked at, are there certain Laker players that when they're on the court, the team runs more plays, fewer plays? Because I think it's easy as a fan to say, oh, you know what, when D'Lo's out there, maybe they'll run more because he's orchestrating the offense. We don't see that. It's the same with him on or off court. I've heard people over the years say, oh, well, when LeBron's out there, he doesn't want to run plays. Again, not the case. We've seen no difference with him on or off court. There's no player on this team that's played significant minutes where they're like plus minus from a play calling standpoint is more than like 2%. So I don't see it being a player or lineup thing. Now, there are certainly certain lineups where it has happened to be higher. I don't think it's because of the lineup. I think that's just something you're naturally going to see when you throw out, hundreds of lineups or whatever it is throughout the course of the year. And we tend to see those lineups do a little bit better. And so not opponent, not lineup. The other thing is it doesn't seem to be based on whether or not they're succeeding with it. Like against the Pelicans, I look at not just their actual efficiency, but I look at my expected points per possession based on where the shots are, how contested the shots are, what kinds of shots they are. And in that game, the team was scoring well and getting really high quality looks within their sets, yet stopped calling them. Like wasn't really calling plays well. So it wasn't, oh no, they've stopped it, so let's stop doing it. It really just seems like they don't have a good grasp on the value of this element of their offense. And I think if they did, it would be something we saw used with more.
And one way that I think this is going to really matter for the Lakers is in crunch time. And that brings us to my question for them of, can they hold up against Denver in the clutch? And we've seen this script numerous times. So for context, the Lakers have lost 8 consecutive games to the Nuggets. The final game of the 2022-23 regular season, final matchup between the two teams, all 4 games last year in the conference finals, and then the 3 games during the regular season this year. So I have some numbers for you. This year in clutch minutes, which are defined by final 5 minutes of the game within 5 points, plus or minus, Denver has outscored LA 27-10 in the 7 minutes of clutch time. And the Lakers, again, 7 minutes, very small sample size, but clutch time typically is a small sample size. The playoffs are a small sample size. LA has an 83.3 offensive rating and a 192.9 defensive rating. So the Nuggets are scoring 193 points per 100 possessions in clutch minutes against the Lakers this year. That is a minus 109.5 net rating. And then going back to the Western Conference Finals, Denver outscored LA 28-13 in the 11 clutch minutes in that series, which was translated to a 68.4 offensive rating for LA. Obviously very bad. and a 112 defensive rating, much better, but that's still a minus 43.6 net rating. And so the clutch again is 5 points within 5 minutes. So I just went back and looked at the 3 games this season of just final 5 minutes, because some of those stretches it was like a close game that Denver hits a couple shots, that the lead expands to 6 points, 8 points, 10 points, and technically that is not being added to the margin in crunch time. So I just went back and looked at the final 5 minutes of all 3 regular season games, and over that combined 15 minutes, Denver outscored LA 47-27. So in a couple of those games, it was close, and they just basically ran the Lakers off the floor. I will say, from a strategic standpoint, LA closed 2 of those games with Taurean Prince defending Jamal Murray. Another game they closed with Cam Reddish defending Jamal Murray. D'Lo missed one of those games. KCP missed a couple games. So like both teams weren't exactly whole. The Lakers weren't playing at the level they've been playing at the last few weeks. But what do you think of the crunch time battle and the way that Denver has dominated LA in the clutch, really going on a year plus now?
I think it speaks to the fact that Denver has a clear identity. They know what their go-to like bread and butter actions are. They can go to a Jamal Murray, Nikola Jokic post up, or I'm sorry, pick and roll, or to a Jokic post up, just whenever they want. I know that's pretty good offense, or very, very good offense. They could, give them the ball at the elbow or run a split cut. If it doesn't work, go to a post up. Great. Or kick it out, run a ball screen. Like, they have easy built-in stuff that their best 2 players can utilize together, and they hammer that a lot. They like Jamal. I've scouted. I ended up needing to scout like 4 teams in preparation here with the play-in, and then this first round, looking at like which teams, what teams' top actions are. Looking at Jamal Murray pick and rolls, like he runs them a lot more than a lot of other teams' top ball handlers. Like, this is an action they go to a ton. Jokic post ups they go to more than anybody else goes to the post, and so it's their identity. They do it all the time, and they do it all 48 minutes. It works all 48 minutes. And on the Laker end of things, I don't really know what our identity is. Is it we've seen Austin Reeves on ball, we've seen D'Lo on ball, we've seen LeBron on ball, we've seen some post up, we've seen the inverted pick and roll, try to hunt a switch that ends up with LeBron dribbling a bunch and then jacking up a shot. Like, we have seen the organized offense rate dip a little bit this season in those clutch moments against Denver specifically. I don't think that's something that needs to continue to happen, but I think it speaks to a lack of like, what do we want to do? If we're going to run a LeBron AD ball screen and they switch it, then what? And to me, that's something all these title teams, they have that bread and butter, and that was a missing piece for the Lakers last season. And they've got to figure out what they want that to be this season, because you can throw out a handful of things that have worked well for them, but none that every game, fourth quarter, crunch time, we know what time it is. You know what's coming. And I think at this point, we don't.
Who would you close with? Because this to me is another kind of subplot to this question of, we don't know who the Lakers, like theoretically it's the starting group, but D'Lo obviously struggled last year in the conference finals. Even going back to the final matchup between these teams on March 2nd, he starts the game 5 for 7 and is playing well, then finishes the game 1 for 6 from that point, gets benched over the final 6 minutes for Cam Reddish. And clearly Darvin didn't fully trust him to close that game. So with looking at, like, obviously LeBron, AD are going to close. I think Austin and Rui were their 3rd and 4th best players in the Denver series in the conference finals. I expect those 2 to be out there. But who do you look at as that 5th guy? And how do you see the defensive matchups going? Because that's another kind of subplot that is really interesting in terms of just like, how can LA try and slow down the 2-man game, and who's boxing out Aaron Gordon, and who's tracking KCP and MPJ around screens, and when those guys are spotting up and stuff. So like, how do you view the defensive side, and who should be closing?
I think so in terms of how I view the defensive side, looking at Denver, at least with their guards and wings, it's not an ISO team. Like, Michael Porter Jr. is a very good player. He's not an ISO player. He's a spot up guy. He's going to run around off screens. He's not really going to go 1v1 against you, but you need to have size on him from a rebounding standpoint to contest his shots, things like that. So, game 1 of the season, having Austin Reeves guard him and Taurean Prince guarding Jamal Murray, like, that didn't make sense to me from the jump. And I don't want to see something like that with
Yes.
with guarding Jamal Murray, yeah, I think we can all agree there. With guarding
Yes.
Jamal Murray, it's the same sort of thing. Like he can ISO, but he doesn't do it frequently, and he doesn't do it enough and at a level where you have to change who you have on the court in order to like just throw everything aside. We need to have our stopper on Jamal Murray from an ISO standpoint. I think for him, it's really how do we defend his ball screens, and depending on I guess what the recommendation ends up being for, all right, are we switching? Are we going to be hedging? Are we just going to stick and drop? You know, what that looks like, I think will dictate who should be out there, because I do think you definitely want to have some size at the 3 for Porter. I don't really care who's guarding KCP other than like, you know, good team defender, rotate, things like that, box out. But in terms of who's on Jamal Murray, I think having someone that can harass him a little bit, navigate screens a bit, like I think you can make a case for Gabe Vincent if he continues to show some growth. I think you can make a case for just Austin's on him and D'Lo's on KCP. I think you can make a case for Austin plays point of attack, and then you stick like Torian out there as your 2 guarding KCP, and still have Rui on Porter or LeBron on Porter. I would say those are, I guess, the 3 options. And if I'm wanting to switch, if I'm the Lakers, I would go as big as possible. And if I'm looking more for like drop coverage, I think the Austin route or the Gabe route can work as well. That's the one thing I haven't yet figured out for me is I want to dig into the data. I want to look at more of the film on Jamal Murray and his post game, or I'm sorry, his pick and roll game. But last year I could speak to what worked, and that was like a high drop coverage where AD was at the level of the screen, but he still had drop responsibility. That took away the immediate pull up threes, and then he was bailing out of there. And you just need to have that guard navigate well. And I mean, I wouldn't mind having Austin point of attack, and then just someone like Torian that can space the floor, and then Rui, LeBron, AD. I think gives you some size, you can switch a bit, and has a good balance of offense and defense. So I'll say that, if not the starting lineup. But I understand there are probably a lot of people yelling at their, you know, listening to this saying no Torian Prince. I'm open to other ideas. What do you have in mind?
So I've been pitching this, and you can completely shut this down if it's too out of the box. But I've been saying this for a couple months now. And what got me thinking about it was I asked AD, because one of the frustrations that the team has been vocal about has been like they know that Denver goes to these AD called them Peja actions and kind of these rip DHOs at the end of games with Jamal and Jokic, and they could go to dribble handoffs, or they could go to pick and rolls, and like they're kind of doing the same thing though for over the last like 3 to 5 minutes. And AD was essentially like, we play like they run their offense a certain way for the first 40, 42, 44 minutes. And then when it comes to the final few minutes, they start going to these actions that like we know they're going to, we just can't stop it. And his kind of follow up was like, I think we got to switch it and just keep them in front of us. So to me, the thing I've been pitching is I would go AD on Jokic and LeBron on Jamal, and specifically in crunch time. Obviously, LeBron can't guard him for 40, 42 minutes, but like for the final 4 to 6 minutes of a close game, put LeBron there and just switch any 2-man action with those guys, pick and rolls, DHOs. And to me, those are the only 2 guys that can credibly defend both players. Like I think the list of guys who can hang with Jokic on the Lakers is AD, LeBron, and Rui. And Rui can't switch on to Jamal. So I think it has to be LeBron and AD. You switch any 2-man action with those 2. Then off the ball, I put Austin on KCP, and he's locking and trailing and just chasing him around screens and cuts and whatever. Then I would go Rui on Aaron Gordon, slap him in the chest a couple times and say, do not let this dude back cut you, get offensive rebounds, get lobs, etc. And then I would put, this is where it gets tricky, because ideally you have Vando out there, and maybe he's the MPJ guy just because he's the one guy that can kind of contest him and has a similar size and length. I would maybe go Spencer on MPJ. And that was something they did in the second matchup. And there were some times he overhelped and left MPJ, and MPJ got open looks, and Spencer can't do that in the playoffs. But like, I look at maybe Spencer. It could be Torian. I think Gabe's too small. D'Lo's too small. But someone who's going to, because with MPJ, I don't want to spoil my X factor, although I'm now kind of saying it for Denver. Like, he's my X factor for Denver. And part of it's just like the Lakers have been terrible at tracking him, and they'll lose him in transition. He'll back cut, he'll curl around screens, and like the Lakers have just done a bad job at tracking him. So I tell Spencer, who's kind of the right combination of like point of attack, in terms of like he's not going to get blown by MPJ, but also he has some size to kind of bother him a little bit. Obviously, MPJ could just shoot over him. There's not a great matchup for MPJ. I don't really know who it is, and I don't trust like. I think Rui and LeBron have to be more involved in the primary action, and then someone has to be boxing out Aaron Gordon and keeping him off the glass. So what do you think of that potential 5-man grouping and like just switching everything with LeBron and AD and saying, if you're going to make tough shots, contested moon balls, like you're going to make those, but we're not letting you get downhill. Because I think that the problem they run into is like Austin can't switch onto Jokic. Cam can't switch onto Jokic. Torian can't switch onto Jokic. And when they've switched that, Jokic just backs them down, takes a couple dribbles, and lofts in a 6-8 footer. And I think it causes too many complications if you're not switching that, in my opinion. But what do you think of that?
I think if that's exactly what Denver will do, it makes sense. I would worry about them looking at that, saying, okay, and then throwing, having Aaron Gordon screen for Jamal Murray instead, or something or run some other screens to get LeBron off of him. And now we're kind of back to the starting scenario where we've got a guard on Murray and a big man on Jokic, and then they can go to whatever they want to. So I would say if I were on the other side of it, there are things that I'd be looking to do to counter what you're doing. But I think as there's some first mover advantage to running that out there, at least for a handful of plays. And then you kind of you put the burden back on Denver to adjust to your adjustment. It sounds a little crazy. It's, LeBron locking down a Jamal Murray, but
he guarded him in 2020, right?
That
was part for stretches.
Yeah, I can see it. I mean, you laid it out well. I think the matchups make sense. Dinwiddie's a really good call out. I like that. I think that if Vando's healthy and playing, would you?
I'd go Vando over Dinwiddie.
Okay.
I just think because I've seen it because I went back, I rewatched again, like I went back and rewatched the games, but specifically kind of focusing in on crunch time, and it's just like even a half-second miscommunication or delay in terms of like what are we doing, what's our coverage, and they kill you. And it's Murray getting to the rim, it's Jokic sealing a smaller defender. So I think LeBron and AD are really the only two guys on the roster that can credibly, in my opinion, defend both guys. Like even Vando's probably a little too slight for Jokic. And then the one, like Jokic has scored well on Rui one-on-one, and I also don't love Rui as the defender in a screen against Murray. Like a lot of times he's in a drop and Murray's able to create space and get good looks. Or again, if you're potentially switching that, now you have a mismatch. So I feel like even with the configuration I was saying, if you are trying to switch Dinwiddie or Austin onto Murray and then run the 2-man action, then you can go with what you were talking about with like a higher drop. And then you play a little bit more conventionally. But I think I'm trying to keep those guys in front because there's been too many times in crunch time where they're just like walking to the rim. And a lot of it, I think, has been LA either not being comfortable switching it or switching it and it being a mismatch. And I think the one way to stymie that is having two guys where it's like, I like my chances if I'm the Lakers of Jamal Murray's like not blowing by AD. And if he is, AD's going to block his shot, or LeBron's going to block his shot. And like just having those two guys, like it's almost like a 2v2 battle in a way. Right. And I think the Lakers have two guys who can at least theoretically hang with those two. Although obviously, as you said, I'm sure Denver will find a way to adjust.
Yeah, it's going to be a tricky matchup. I'm definitely worried about the top end for Denver, but my biggest question for the Nuggets is, can their bench be effective? Looking at what they have top to bottom, there's some guys in here I don't really trust and have not been impactful players. Looking at like our LeBron metric at BBall Index, I know, they run a lot of 5-man, like 5-starter lineup minutes, more than any team in the NBA, and they have for some time. But that also means they play a lot of 0, 1, or 2 starter lineups. They'll always have either Jokic or Murray out there with them, but in those like Jamal Murray, no Jokic minutes with like one of their not very good backup bigs against like an AD lineup, I feel like we should be able to dominate in those. And so they're going to need some contributions from a Reggie Jackson, maybe getting some 1v1 juice and getting by the Lakers front line, or Christian Brown doing some good things as a shooter, Justin Holiday, Peyton Watson. Like they need contributions from those guys, because if they can hold their own in their bench minutes, they're going to win the series, because their starting lineup has played more than any starting lineup has played in the NBA this season. So many possessions, so many minutes. They've got such great synergy. They know exactly what they want to do. And it's really tough to beat that group. They've been the most effective lineup in the NBA this season when you look at, accounting for the minutes piece of it. And so a Lakers path to victory includes beating up on some of these weaker bench players and lineups. And, I'm looking at their offensive impact compared to rotation players within the same kind of, on-ball guard and wing grouping, off-ball guard and wings, and then bigs. Brown's a D, Watson's an F, Holiday's an F, Jackson's a D minus offensive impact. Aaron Gordon is at a C minus this year. Huge drop off for him from last season. KCP's only at a C. So they offensively, if you can slow down those Murray ball screens, there's not much else going on when Jokic is off the court. And then defensively, I think you should be able to put some points up on this group with their bench lineups in as well. So if they can hold their own, and if, one or two of those guys steps up, it's looking good for Denver. But if the Lakers can win the minutes against Denver's bench and in those 2, 3, 4 benchman lineups, that looks pretty good for LA.
And this also brings up the question to me of like, how deep do the Lakers go with their bench? Like they've been running an 8.5, 9-man rotation for the most part over the last month and a half with the starters plus Taurean Prince, Jackson Hayes, Spencer Dinwiddie, and Gabe Vincent. And we saw in the New Orleans playing game that Spencer had a tough first shift and Darvin went away from him, went with Gabe in the second half and sort of benched Spencer. But it's kind of been these last few important games where Taurean has sort of become the sixth man. It's been an either or thing with Spencer and Gabe, and then Jackson's in there for like 6 to 12 minutes, depending on the matchup and depending on how much they're playing AD. So I think that's like I look at the bench minutes at the end of the first and third quarters when LeBron is out. We saw in the New Orleans game, that's where like LeBron checked out. It was basically a tied game. Might have been a one possession game, but New Orleans goes on a run there to close the first quarter. New Orleans also goes on a run to close the third quarter. So those have been a pivot points for the Lakers, where whenever LeBron, like despite AD obviously being their best player and their most important player this year, and them having some success when LeBron has been out, in terms of like recently and just in general, I think those stretches when LeBron goes out and it's just AD as the primary kind of shot creator or primary offensive force, they've struggled a bit at times in certain matchups. So that could be a pivot point in this series. For me, it's speaking of LeBron, like how does Denver guard this version of LeBron? And I think it's flown under the radar how good LeBron has been coming out of the All-Star break. And then specifically this season, him shooting 41% on threes this year compared to entering the playoffs. He had been overall for the playoffs, he shot 27% on threes, and entering that series, he was in the high 20s as well. So Denver, like the version of LeBron that we saw last year in the conference finals, like they're coming off a couple tough series. He was still hampered by that foot injury, and he still put up really good numbers in the conference finals from just a raw output perspective. But he was not himself from a shooting perspective, and he did not have that athleticism and burst that makes LeBron so difficult to guard. So if he's the guy that we saw against New Orleans, if he's the guy that we've seen in big games down the stretch this season, thinking about like Golden State and several other games, like that guy, I think is a different player than the one that the Nuggets faced in the conference finals. And I think he had a pretty good game that the last time these two teams played. I thought he was getting downhill a lot. Denver really struggled to protect the rim and just keep him out of the paint. So if you get that version of LeBron and Denver can't go under screens as much against him and he can pull up and make that shot more consistently, I think that is a formula for LA keeping this closer, specifically with the starting groups and just whenever LeBron is on the floor and in crunch time. So I think LeBron being at a different level physically, being healthier, shooting the ball better, that is to me, a path for LA at least winning a game or two, if not, making this a 7-game series or even winning it.
Yeah, I'd agree with you there. Him with, 2 healthy legs and feet it's a big difference. That burst he has matters. And especially in a series like this, if he doesn't have that burst and they can stick an Aaron Gordon on him and just, bang with him in the post, you got to feel pretty good as Denver. But if they have to worry about him as an on-ball like perimeter player as well as a post player, you really struggle if you're Denver to find a 1v1 defender that should be able to do a good job against him. And that's where, Denver does such a good job at a team level, helping very proactively and almost like pre-rotating and over-rotating and shrinking the floor. That's really where their strength comes from, is that team defense instead of 1v1 defense. But LeBron able to have that burst and kind of slice through it no matter what. And then also, run your help beaters when they're overcommitting. Between those two things, you've got to head into the series as LA knowing that, or at least hoping that LeBron can be that guy that we've seen. And it's a good thing the play-in statistics don't count, because Bron and AD did not have a very good game that last one.
No.
They both have to put up. They got to be much more productive, of course.
Yeah.
And I think that downhill ability will be a big piece of that.
Yeah, and I will say, to be fair to Denver's side, like I think Aaron Gordon is one of the best LeBron on-ball defenders in the league. Like he's one of the few guys that has the size, the strength, the athleticism, the foot speed to hang with LeBron. I think in going over the film, like his ability to cut off LeBron's driving angles, his ability to recover around screens, and then again, like he is slightly bigger than LeBron, at least from a height perspective. Like he's that's as tough of a matchup as I think LeBron will face in terms of like an on-ball guy who can match him physically. So Aaron Gordon, like even with this version of LeBron, Aaron Gordon, I think is going to defend him as well as is reasonably possible. So that's another kind of, I think, thing with this is just like Aaron Gordon's defense. Can LA target him? Can they get LeBron or get him switch off LeBron? Like I know they've targeted, they've spammed the LeBron Austin pick and roll at the end of some of these games and gone at Jamal Murray. That's, I think, something that could work. But Aaron Gordon is a tough cover in terms of just how well he defends LeBron. So that to me is like another interesting subplot of just, can you find ways to mitigate his, or get him off LeBron rather, and exploit whoever else is on him then.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It gets into some of my series X factor, so I won't say any more, but we'll get back to this later.
Okay, so let's touch on the Lakers player X factor. Like who is your X factor for this series?
For me, it has to be, and I don't know, he's the most important player, I think, and he's got to play at the top of his game. And to me, that's Anthony Davis. I think you can go a lot of different ways with this, but when I'm looking at, from a game planning standpoint, where Denver might have some weaknesses, what LA will need to do to defend the Nuggets, he's at the centerpiece of so much of it, and a lot of it doesn't work at all without a guy like him with his capabilities. That high drop I talked about isn't something a lot of defenders can do, because they aren't able to flip their hips and recover backwards the way that he can. And so whether it's that or it's switching defense, he has to be at the top of his game. From a rebounding standpoint, Denver is a team that rebounds very well. And so cleaning up on the defensive boards, he has to be dominant. It would be great if he can add some value on the offensive boards as well. Him as a role threat, so much of the Lakers playbook this season is revolving around the threat of him rolling and how that opens up driving lanes, how that opens up cuts and kickouts. So that the post game from him, like, he offensively, I think, will be involved a lot in a lot of different ways. And then defensively, regardless of if Denver wants to play with their post game or with their pick and roll game or both, or the handoffs, he will be a really, really important piece for all of it. And pretty much no matter what coverage you want to run, he has to do his job at a really high level. And I think the two-way load on him throughout the series is going to be high. And he's got to be there to meet that requirement in order for the Lakers to pull something like this off.
And then we don't know yet. I'm actually disappointed we didn't ask Darvin Ham this today, but no one asked about AD's back spasms. And that was something that you just mentioned, the New Orleans game and him going 6 for 16. And he said afterward that he was really hindered by that. And it affected his ability to finish around the basket. It affected his defensive mobility. I thought Zion was able to get certain angles on him that he wasn't able to get in the previous matchup, in part because AD was somewhat limited defensively in that aspect. So that's certainly an X factor within the X factor of AD, is just like it helps that they're not playing a game tomorrow. Like that's another additional benefit to winning that game, was like, had they been playing tomorrow against the Kings, now you have a physical matchup with Sabonis. Then if you win that, you're now going to Oklahoma City the following day and going 24-hour turnaround basically into a game one on the road in a hostile road environment. So AD being able to get a few days off, then having a few days off in between certain games in this series, I think is going to help him physically. And I'm with you. Like, I think for him, the big thing is going to be, what does his jump shot look like? Can LA find way? Like, he has not had the success you would expect against Jokic in terms of just like scoring on him 1v1 and trying to post him up or go through him. A lot of it's been face ups and attacking quickly, or his jumper. And his jumper has been better this season. It's obviously not been back to the 2020 level. We might not ever see that level again. But the conference finals that year, his jumper was at a different level. I mean, game 2, game winner, from 3, and like he was at a different level as a shooter. But if he can just exploit Denver when they are sagging off him, if they are in drop coverage and he's picking and popping into like 16, 18 feet, if he can exploit them on the offensive glass when they're switching, or he has a mismatch, like similar to what he did against New Orleans at times, like those little things I think offensively can really swing the game, because Denver has dominated the glass, and I think if AD can't make them pay when he has mismatches or when they are giving him open space, like that's a big thing for him offensively, in my opinion.
Yeah, good call out with all of that, and especially the health. If he's not 100%, this isn't going to look good. And with the jump shot, of course, we want it to be effective. But if he comes out in game 1 and hits like 6 long mid-range jumpers and is lighting the world on fire, it'll be good short term. But to me, that's a sign of we're not getting shots. We're not getting to the rim. We're not getting the shots that we need to be getting to have long-term success. So as a late clock bailout, I want it as an option, and you want those to go in. But if his shot profile is AD as a jump shooter, we've got bigger problems that over the course of a 7-game series can really hurt you in a way that, in a play-in game, if he gets away with that, all right, we don't have to worry about this anymore. Series is over. We won. We'll take it. Take your money and run. But if he's able to get to the rim and, try to get Jokic in foul trouble, which I'm sure is something every single team in the NBA says, that would be incredibly impactful as well. And, this Laker team has been good at drawing fouls. Post-ups and isolations draw a lot of fouls. The Lakers like to use those things. And I think AD has that, quickness with force to his attack 1v1 that should be effective. And I think he's done a much better job this season at, when he is picking and rolling, if he catches sort of in that mid-range area, he's doing a much better job taking one dribble, getting to the rim, and then trying to fight through some contact and put up a shot instead of picking, standing there, catching the ball, and then settling for a jumper. So that tweak from him, I think, has resulted in a better season, and I want to see that continue. And if it doesn't, I think it's a sign that Denver's doing a really good job with that help defense and those almost pre-rotations, and the Lakers haven't done a good job of countering that.
So I'm going to go with the conventional pick in D'Angelo Russell as my X factor. And it's no secret, D'Lo really struggled against Denver last year in the conference finals, averaged 6.2 points per game, shot 32% from the floor, 13% on threes, ultimately got benched in game 4, or was moved to the bench and then only played 14 minutes. And game didn't have a great opening night against Denver. The Lakers overall, much different team than they are now. Didn't play in the second game. And then, as I mentioned earlier, that third game gets off to the hot start, has a good first half, then starts to struggle in the third quarter. And ultimately, Darvin goes away from him in the fourth quarter. So I think if we're looking at a way for LA to win this series, I think D'Lo has to be impactful. He doesn't necessarily have to play at the level he's played at all regular season. Like that might be unrealistic for this matchup. They can put KCP Christian Brown, Peyton Watson. Like they have some wing defenders. Even MPJ defended D'Lo at times in the conference finals. So like they have a lot of perimeter length and guys that could potentially bother him just with their size, their length, their athleticism. And maybe it's just like not a great matchup for D'Lo from that perspective. But he's got to be better than 6 points and 32% shooting, 13% on threes. And I think as when we're looking at again a way for the Lakers to win, like there has to be a certain level of defense that they play, and it's got to be better than being the 22nd ranked defense since February 1st. But there's also an offensive element of like they probably have to outscore Denver and just outshoot them for stretches, and maybe that's like the crunch time formula is we might not be able to stop these guys, but we have better shooters in some regards, and we can be a higher volume shooting team if we make that adjustment offensively. And if you're gonna overload the paint, like now we have guys we can put around LeBron and AD to make you really pay. So I would like really the first time D'Lo plays a crunch time in this series is going to be like the first time we've really seen it this season. Because again, I'm not really going to count opening night. Like again, the Lakers are just totally different team, different rotation, different starters, different style of play. They were still barely grasping the 5-out offense then. But like, I think D'Lo, as cliche as it is, like they just need a better version that they got the West Conference Finals. I think it's a pretty low bar. I think he will be better. But if he can shoot 38, 40, 42% on good volume on threes and just play similar, like even 80% of what he's been in the regular season, that is a very useful player who I think elevates the Lakers offensive ceiling in this series. And again, I don't know if their defense, especially without Vando, is going to be at a good enough level to contain the Nuggets and to really slow them down. So there might be some shootouts in this series. And if they get into a shootout, I like the guy who's been shooting close to 40, mid 40s on catch and shoot threes, who broke the Lakers single season franchise record. I like that guy in a shootout, but he's got to play defense. The Nuggets are going to target him. We know that, like they're going to pick on him as much as they can, try and get him off the floor. They're going to bother him with KCP. So like he's got to be mentally engaged, mentally ready for that. And I think really game one is going to set the tone in a lot of ways. As like, I don't want to get too sports TV talky, but like I think it matters, right? Like I think it matters how he starts this series, and if he gets benched again in the fourth quarter, like what ripple effect does that have the rest of the way?
Yeah, you'd love to see him get out there, play well, close, and play well while closing, and that momentum and confidence carry over. Yeah, it certainly has been uncomfortable for a lot of fans seeing this team win games while playing great offense and not so good defense, but it's a sort of a roster that's built to be good offensively. And if they, call plays well and D'Lo's himself and LeBron and AD are cooking, like you've got a lot of good weapons. And if you're looking for a reason for hope with D'Lo that he'll just shoot better this postseason, throughout his career when it comes to his just his pick and roll pull up threes, which I think are a big thing for him, a lot of the value he provides is the gravity he has drawing a defender at the level of the screen, and that opens up the roll. And in order to tag, in order to stop the roll, you've got to allocate resources, and now all of a sudden, you're drawing help. Now you've got a 4v3 off ball. Great. D'Lo ball screen, immediate 4v3. Like that is value on its own. D'Lo last season with the Lakers shot 17% on his pick and roll pull up threes. Absolutely horrific. 30 shot sample size. That's the kind of stuff that happens on a small sample. And throughout his career before being a Laker, I guess the second time, he had been in the low 40s to high 30s with that number, which is good. This season, he's been at 43%, which is very good. He's been himself. And I know it's certainly been up and down at different points in the year, but holistically for the season overall, like he has shot the way he had been shooting. And what we saw from him last postseason is not a good reflection on what he generally is doing. And even if we look at his postseason history prior to last year, he was shooting 44% on those pick and roll pull up threes. So it's not like every postseason he's bad at this thing. If he's himself, that has value. That fits in really well. When that shot wasn't falling last season, like I understand LA benching him because he was, he wasn't providing that value as a ball handler and as an off ball guy. Like, yeah, he's shooting well. He shot 43%. Or no, this season he's shooting 43. yeah, last year he shot 43% on his spot up threes as well, but that value offensively isn't worth what they were giving up defensively. And so you have to have the responsibility and the impact on offense to justify the defense. And if his pull-up game isn't there, the math just doesn't work anymore. So if he can be himself, he mostly has been himself. I've got high hopes for him, but that defensive bit is something for him and Murray when we get to the series X factor I want to dig into, because you've got two guys there that I guess depending on which team does a better job targeting the other team's point guard, you might see an edge emerge.
Who's your Denver X factor?
For me, and maybe this is my PTSD speaking from last series, is Jamal Murray, and specifically his shot making. Because when we look at him as a player on like the regular season this year, he's ranked between 10th and 12th with his overall shot making, his rim shot making, mid-range shot making, and three-point shot making. He's been good, not elite, not bad, but pretty good among point guards this season with 1,000 or more minutes. So top 20% among like the 50-ish point guards with that minute total. That's good. He's a very good player. He's a good shooter. And that shot making is adjusting for shot quality. It's effectively looking at like how well are you shooting given, how difficult your shots are. So he's good, not elite. When we played him last year in the playoffs, he was hitting everything. And it seemed like no matter what you did, no matter what the game plan was, it did not matter. He was hitting absolutely everything. And if that happens again, like, I don't know what you can do. It's those sorts of things that happens in basketball sometimes. We saw that with like AD in the bubble with his jump shot. Like the number of bailouts he had for LA when the offense wasn't able to do anything was just incredible, and it helped a lot. Jamal Murray did that specifically in that series against LA. And we can see that with like his pick and roll shooting in the playoffs last season against all other playoff opponents. So the other, 3 rounds, he shot 0.2 points per shot above expectations on average. So about 11% above average on 2-pointers, if you just want to convert it that way. So 0.2. In the Lakers series, he shot 0.73 points per shot above expectations, which is ridiculous. That's like shooting 37% above the norm on twos. Like, absolutely unsustainable, Mickey Mouse. Like, there's nothing you can do with that. And in every one of those games, the Lakers actually held his shot quality below his playoff average in ball screen. So it wasn't like the Lakers threw out a bad game plan or it wasn't working. Like, they were holding his shots down at an individual level, and also at including his pass outs. They did a good job game planning and executing against the Jamal Murray ball screens. He just hit everything. And if that happens again, you're not going to win this series. Looking at like his offensive impact this season, he ranked 32nd last regular season in our LeBron metric, which is offensive impact per 100 possessions, 29th this regular season, which is right around where D'Lo is. Those shot making rankings I talked about earlier, D'Lo is literally right next to him. He and D'Lo have been approximately the same impact in shooting caliber of players this regular season. If D'Lo can hold par with Jamal Murray, and then we've got LeBron and AD up against Jokic, like, if D'Lo can be that guy and be on this level, that can be really good for the Lakers. But if Murray hits everything, it's checkmate at that point. I don't know what you can do.
Did you track it in the regular season against the Lakers? Do you know that off the top of your head?
Ooh, off the top of my head, I do not.
Okay. I'd be curious because it feels like that's continued. I've seen some narrative on Lakers Twitter be like, well, look at all these crazy shots they hit in the conference finals. And I'm like, feels like it continued into the regular season. Like, we could go through clips from the 3 regular season games. Like, that's kind of what this team does, and probably does it obviously to a higher level against the Lakers for whatever reason. But like, Jokic had at least one moonball shot in all 3 games, and like, that's sort of what he does. But I'm on the topic of shooting, I'm going to go with a different shooter for my X factor for the Nuggets. I'm going with MPJ, as I spoiled a little bit earlier in the pod. But this season, he shot 42.9% on catch and shoot 3-pointers. Against the Lakers, that was 61.1%. And of course, he had the game in the last matchup, went 10 for 10, 5 for 5 on threes. I asked LeBron about MPJ today at practice, and that's obviously a guy that LeBron will probably be matched up with to at least start games. And he was just saying that when MPJ is making shots, it's almost impossible to beat the Nuggets just because you're already focused on the 2-man game with Jokic and Murray. And if MPJ is getting open for back cuts, or the Lakers aren't tracking him in transition and he's walking into open threes, which has been a thing, at least in the regular season, but even going back to the last series, like that is where once he starts getting going, then it's like that's he's 6'10", 7-foot wingspan, has a very high release point, and I think he's one of the tougher guys for LA to match up with. Again, especially if Vando isn't playing in this series, which as of today we heard everything's the same, no real updates. I've heard he's been ramping up his conditioning, but he has not returned yet to contact activity, so still has to clear that hurdle before being cleared to return to playing. But looking at even Rui and LeBron, like those guys aren't great with their off-ball tracking and just overall defensive awareness in those situations. So I think MPJ has really benefited from the Lakers losing him a lot, helping off of him, and him getting a lot of open looks. And if that continues and he gets hot again, like I just, at that point, you know what you're getting from Jokic, you know what you're getting from Murray. I think you're going to get a baseline level of things from KCP and Aaron Gordon. But MPJ is the one guy where it's like he could give you 25 a night, or he could give you 10, 12. And like that to me is a big swing factor for the Nuggets offense.
Yeah, it has to be. And he shot 42% on spot up threes this year, 40% in transition threes, 46% on his off-screen threes. So that is danger personified as an off-ball shooter. And again, not an ISO guy. He's hit like, let me see here. He's only hit like 8 shots in isolation all season, but you have to have the size on him to box him out and then also contest those shots. And looking at the Lakers like off-ball screen defense, at least in the regular season, they were the second most like drop heavy team. And so what I see with that is whether it's AD or Hayes or Wood or whoever, they are not going to be at the level of the screen to be able to help if your off-ball screen navigation from his defender or KCP's defender isn't sharp. So if they're in multitasking and they're trying to help on something else as their guys running off a screen, you're in trouble. If they're just not, using good technique, or Denver gets away with moving screens or whatever it happens to be, help is not coming with those plays, or at least for most of how LA has played the season, it had not been coming. We'll see if they adjust that at all. But if the Lakers play their normal style of defense, it puts a lot of pressure on the ball screen navigation, or not the ball screen navigation, but the off-ball screen navigation, that chaser defense for the Lakers wings and guards. And I wouldn't say that's been a particular strength of the team this season. So yeah, I could see him having a big impact this season or series.
And then a couple more here just before we wrap up. So what is your series X factor? And then we'll hit on your series prediction.
So for me, the series X factor is which starting point guard defense will be put more on display, because with Jamal Murray and D'Angelo Russell, you have two, like, as at an individual defender level, staying in front and chasing and rotating. Well, D'Lo's pretty good rotating, but their size and all that stuff, it's not very good from an impact standpoint. It's not very good from a rebounding standpoint. Not very good. And they both grade out as F caliber defensive impact players on the season, and that's one of the big reasons Jamal Murray's overall impact isn't as high as you might think it should be. Denver does a really good job, and especially in the playoffs, they engage in such smart help defense that it's easier to not notice that he's a negative impact defender, because he's not being asked to defend one-on-one. There's always someone there. There's always that second line ready to help. The Lakers haven't done as much of that. Now they do have AD on the back line, but how each team approaches that situation will be really important. Jamal Murray this season in our perimeter isolation defensive metric at BBall Index graded out as the worst point guard one-on-one defender in the NBA. And so I think the Lakers should look to attack that. And it might be LeBron trying to hunt him. It could just be Austin Reeves or Spencer Dinwiddie trying to go at him, or D'Angelo Russell. It's not really his game, but if they can get at him, blow by him, create advantages without needing an action, without needing to run a set play, that can, add some value and put him in a tough spot. We saw D'Lo need to have his minutes cut at numerous times this season and last playoffs, and it's bad when he's played off the court. But if you think about it, it's in some way, luxury is not the right word, but it's almost nice that you can have him off the court and there are other viable options for the Lakers. Whereas if Jamal Murray's defense is being exposed time and time again, they can't bench him. Like there's no option here. They don't have a backup plan. So if you can find that way to put his defense under the microscope, it will sustain and you're going to get it for 40, 45 minutes a game, every game this series. So if the Lakers can figure out how to do that, Denver will, engage in tactics defensively. If they can beat those tactics and have the higher ground tactically, that can be a big advantage for the Laker offense. And the same can be said for D'Lo on the other end of the court. But again, if he comes off, it hurts your offense. But the Lakers do have some other viable options they could potentially go to. So it's not necessarily checkmate for the Lakers if this happens. But if the Lakers offensively can get Murray in that compromising position, Denver's in a really, really bad spot.
Yeah. And I wonder if eventually Denver goes away from having KCP on D'Lo and Jamal on Austin, just because the LeBron Austin 2-man game is so elite. And it's something that, again, they've been able to spam in crunch time against Denver, have some success against it. In general, it's been one of their more effective, 2-man tandems. And in terms of just like you can do an inverted pick and roll, you could do a traditional pick and roll. You could target Gordon and see like how is he going to defend that. But you could also obviously target Jamal Murray. And I wonder if that becomes a thing late in games. Maybe you just bring KCP into the action, and they have been okay with KCP defending LeBron or switched on to him at times. And then you just have Jamal off the ball on D'Lo, and it's sort of like, if this dude's more of a catch and shoot guy, then you kind of know your help and your assignment in that case, versus like, I don't think like you can still exploit the D'Lo LeBron 2-man game, but I just don't think it's as effective as the Austin LeBron 2-man game. I don't think the Lakers have run it as much as the Austin LeBron 2-man game. And just as an ISO scorer and guy who's going to break someone off the dribble, I think Austin's at a different level than D'Lo. And I forgot who tweeted it out, but I think he was the 14th most efficient ISO scorer this season on a per possession basis. He is in Austin. So I think that's going to be kind of a chess match there of just like at some point, I think they're going to start with KCP on D'Lo and Jamal on Austin, but do they eventually go away from that and just say like, we kind of know with D'Lo, it's going to be more catch and shoot or more like pull up threes. And we're more confident in Jamal kind of taking that away versus him switching on to LeBron or having to guard Austin and ISO, because Austin's been able to kind of get what he wants against Jamal. And so that's a bit of a chess match. For me though, speaking of Jamal, like my question is, who are the matchup's second and third best players? And because looking at the regular season and the conference finals, so some quick numbers here. Western Conference Finals, LeBron was 28, 9.5, and 10 on 52, 27. Again, 27% 3-point shooting, 76 shooting splits. He was a -8 for the series. AD, 27 points, 14 rebounds, 3 blocks, 49, 50, 88 shooting splits. So actually shot the ball pretty well, but -36. And then Jamal was 33 points a game, 32.5, 6 rebounds, 5 assists, 53, 41, 95 shooting splits. And Denver was +40 at his minutes. And then looking at this season, LeBron's been 24, 7 and 7, 55, 33, 63 shooting splits, +0, so neutral. AD 22 and 9, 3 blocks, 47, 20, 79 shooting splits, -39. And then Jamal has been 25, 5 and 9, 51, 47, 75, +26. So I know I just rattled off a lot of numbers. Essentially, Jamal Murray is outplayed LeBron and AD in both the Western Conference Finals and the regular season matchups. And that's not even factoring in the crunch time numbers. I think LeBron and AD are something like 2 for 14 combined in clutch time against Denver in both the regular season and the conference finals. So if Jamal Murray is the second best player in this series, I think it's pretty simple. I think Denver is going to win and probably win in 4 or 5 games. If LeBron and AD can be the second and third best players and outplay Jamal, then I think the Lakers have a chance to make this, again, a 6 or 7 game series and potentially even win it. So to me, it's kind of that simple of oftentimes in a playoff series, the team with the best player wins or the team with like 2 of the 3 best players. And in these matchups, like Jokic to me has been the best player, but oftentimes, like AD's had a couple of 40-point games. LeBron's had some big games. He had the 40-point game, 40-point triple-double, or I think he was one rebound off in game 4 of the conference finals. But like Jamal overall has been more effective than both of those guys. And if that continues, again, I think it's just a short series. And like, even if Austin plays well, Rui, D'Lo steps up, like, I just think if Denver has the 2 best players, I don't see how the Lakers win this series.
Yeah, and there's a lot that goes into that between the schemes and the rotations and the lineups and the shot making and all of that. But I think, put simply, that makes a lot of sense to me, and I think it's a good way to summarize what's going on here. Now, I think there are a lot of other things that go into this. Like, we don't have to dig deep. I know we're going long here, but the Lakers' transition offense is a big thing for them. Denver doesn't run in transition much at all. That could be an edge. The Lakers' defensive Nikola Jokic post-ups, something I just did. We didn't talk about it at all here today, but I watched every post-up of his on the season and tracked it all and figured out which help types do work and don't work. And I posted a tweet thread about that, and I'm gonna get a dashboard up that people can play around with if they're interested there, because it's more than just send help or don't send help. There's a lot of complexity to it, and I found some pretty clear things that worked and some things that don't work so well. And thankfully, the Lakers on the season were pretty good in terms of their approach to defending him. I think their defense of Jamal Murray ball screens and the choices they make there are going to be huge. So some other things that matter and will help dictate whether or not, Murray or Jokic or LeBron or AD end up being first, second, third, or fourth in the series. But lots of key players, so many guys we could have named. And I'm hoping it makes out for a really fun series. I still have that fear in me from what Jamal Murray did last year. But I guess overall, like, what are you thinking? How are you thinking this one will go, if you had to call it?
Yeah, one quick thing I wanted to add to this is Denver has dominated the rebound battle in the regular season. They also won it. I think it was like 51.5 to 48.5 in terms of rebound percentage on the conference finals. In the regular season, it's been 55-45. So, and I think they have a 35% offensive rebound rate. So like that is another factor here of the Lakers. Like some of the things the Lakers have really struggled with, be it transition defense, rebounding, and 3-point defense in terms of at least allowing open threes, allowing a high volume of threes. Like those things can play into Denver's favor. And again, if they're turning Denver into a high volume 3-point shooting team, and it's MPJ, KCP getting open looks, Jamal, Jokic, etc. If they're dominating the glass, and if the Lakers aren't winning the transition battle, like those are several factors that if they go Denver's way, I think, again, that leans more toward a 4 or 5 game series. So for me, I came into this like once I saw the matchup, my first reaction was a 5-game series. I thought LA would get one of the 2 games in LA, and Denver would win the rest. In rewatching the film, going over the numbers, and especially rewatching the crunch times, and just how many mistakes the Lakers made and how Denver capitalized on virtually every mistake. Like it really felt like they capitalized on like 8 out of 10 mistakes, like in each game. I do think these matchups have been close. They've often been, again, we referenced the crunch time numbers. Like they've often been within a few possessions at most, with 4, 5, 6 minutes left, and then Denver just out executes them. So right now, I guess my pick, to cut to the chase, is Denver in 6. I could see this being a 2-2 series that ultimately Denver wins game 5 and then comes into LA and closes out. But I think the Lakers, as long as they're not making some of the same mistakes that they've made in crunch time and aren't closing with Taurean Prince on Jamal Murray and Cam Reddish on Jamal Murray, and guarding the Jokic Murray 2-man game the way that they've defended it in the regular season, I think LA should be able to probably win a shootout and then win a close game where they can out execute Denver and they push it to 6. But I don't know. Like I kind of want, like, the other thing that we probably should have mentioned at some point is, like, we haven't really seen these 2 teams play in their current iterations. Like, again, last couple matchups, KCP was out, D'Lo missed the matchup. The Lakers were not really at the level that they've been playing at the last few weeks on that March 2nd matchup. So like in some ways, game 1 is a blank slate in terms of like the Lakers' current identity versus who Denver has been. So I'm fascinated to just see how game 1 plays out, and we'll obviously have a lot more to talk about, after that. But right now, I'm leaning Denver in 6, though. I think the Lakers have a lot of meat on the bone that they have not really addressed, and if they can do that, maybe they could push it to 7. Maybe they could, like, I would say Denver's like the clear favorite, but I think LA, if they play, like, if LeBron and AD again are the second and third best players, I think LA has a shot to at least make this a 7-game series. But right now, I'd go Denver in 6.
Yeah, there's certainly a path to victory. Part of that would be I'm with you in terms of it. It seems like Denver capitalized on almost every mistake. It felt like every time there was any sort of chaos, they came out on top. Whenever the ball was, bouncing around, or there was a missed layup or anything like that, like they always every time seemed to capitalize and come out on top when any sort of 50-50 situation, whether it be a loose ball or not, it seemed like it resulted in a Denver highlight, which was so demoralizing in these games that ended up being pretty close. But I do wonder if the current iteration of the Lakers with Rui out there with the starters does result in them rebounding better, holding their own more. If and when they do help on Jokic, they've got just more size off ball to just collectively be able to rotate and recover. This is a Lakers team that I feel is better than last season's Lakers team. This is a Nuggets team that I feel is worse than last season's Nuggets team. And looking at the data, it is worse. And I know they're really well coached. I felt like they had the best adjustments the Lakers faced last year. And they also had the best adjustments the Lakers faced the title year for the Lakers in the bubble. I thought that Malone did a better job than Eric Spoelstra from a tactical standpoint with tracking everything. And I have a lot of respect for them and what they do. My heart wants to, find something more in here, but looking at the current iterations of these teams and only lineups for these rotation players have played, the Nuggets have been a plus 11.6 net rating team. The Lakers have been a plus 3.6 net rating team. And so to me, that looks more like a Denver and 5 sort of series. I was going to say Denver and 6. You said 6, and I'll be a little optimistic and say 7. But I really think the Lakers have a lot of work to do, and all it takes is Darvin Ham not calling plays like 1 or 2 games, and this thing's cooked. So I think 5 is probably what my mind says, but I'll say 7 for my heart.
That's where, like, I've been kind of at 5 for the last few days, and I would say the last 24 hours is when I switched to 6, and just looking at some of the mistakes that the Lakers have made and being like, they can't keep making these same mistakes, and then Denver capitalizing every single time. Like, it has been so one-sided in crunch time that I don't think it can continue, but it's sort of happened for 8 straight games. So at some point, it's also like, how does the mental edge, like, I really think that, and again, I don't like speaking in hyperbolic terms, but I really think game 1 is very important for LA, just from a psychological perspective, because if you come out and lose game 1, and whether you get blown out just because it's, sometimes we'll see the home court team just blows a team out in game 1, or like you lose, even worse, maybe a crunch time game in game 1, all of a sudden, like the weight going into game 2 of just, it's going to be all over the sports TV shows. It's going to be all over social media. Like, the Lakers should have ducked them, and like they're going to sweep them, like all that stuff. And it's hard to just tune out all of that noise and not let it affect you on some level. So I think the gravity kind of going into game 2. So I think if the Lakers are going to win the series, they probably have to win game 1. And that's almost like a game 7 for them. Again, you got to win 4 overall, but I just think, like, if Denver's won 9 in a row, maybe they've won 9 crunch times in a row, or however many it's been, like, that's where it gets a little, at some point, I think there's a psychological edge. And Denver, I mean, Mike Malone's already been out there. We swept them last year. We swept them this year. Like, there's going to be some games in the media, and that's what Denver did last year. They were very vocal about playing D'Lo off the floor. They took shots at LeBron. They took shots at the Lakers. So, like, Denver is going to do that, or specifically Michael Malone. So we'll see. But I think we're in agreement here, like 5 to 7 games for Denver, but still, it's tough to see LA winning this. It's not impossible, but it's going to take like a level of execution and focus and attention to detail that we have yet to see them really have for a sustained period in general, but specifically against Denver.
Yep. Hate to see it, but Yeah, this is gonna be hard. It feels like they need to play a perfect game from an approach standpoint, from an adjustment standpoint, and there's just no low hanging fruit with how Denver plays, what their roster is, what their coaching staff does. It will certainly be tough. I do think there's a path to victory, but they really need to start out strong. And I think we'll know. I think I'll have a good sense by the end of the first quarter of game one. Like, are they here calling plays? Are they here from a game plan standpoint, doing what they need to do, defending the ball screens, the post ups? Offensively, are they attacking with purpose, or are they just out there kind of doing whatever comes to mind? And we'll get a good sense early if they're ready to play and if they have that sort of mental edge and toughness like you talked about.
Well, Tim, thank you so much for your time. You were more than generous. I know we went over by quite a bit, but this was a fun conversation. Be sure to follow him at Tim_NBA. As he mentioned several times on the podcast, he does great threads. He's breaking down all the numbers, the X's and O's. He's throwing in charts in there. He'll throw in film. And one of the best follows on Lakers Twitter, one of the best people covering the Lakers, one of the smartest people covering the Lakers. Check out the Lakers Exceptionalism pod, one of my favorite listens. Also, check out BBall Index, subscribe to it. And anything else I didn't mention, Tim?
No, you covered it all. I appreciate being here, Jovan. It's always fun talking to you. Hopefully, next time we talk, we'll be in good spirits again. But maybe
round two
maybe
preview.
round two. Yeah. We'll see. Thanks, man. I appreciate the time, and I think you covered it all. Thank you.
Appreciate you.